Hello YouTube, welcome back. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and for the returning subscribers, please consider liking, commenting and sharing. Welcome. With marijuana being illegal in most African countries, its use has continued rising on a daily basis. And have you ever sat down and asked yourself various questions surrounding the use of marijuana? Is it because of its effects that it has impacted in the lives of many young youths in Africa using it? Or is it because of our African culture that most African countries have not considered legalizing marijuana? Today we answer your questions and we look at the top African countries that smoke marijuana the most. And also, in today's episode, we also feature 10 African countries that use marijuana in lower quantities. Welcome. A recent report on tobacco use from a public health campaign group and US academics has found that smoking rates is rising among adults in at least 10 countries in Africa, as well as among young people. According to the report, there were still increasing numbers of smokers in Africa because the population is younger and drug use is higher among young people than older people. Furthermore, a 2021 report by the United Nations report on drug use also confirmed that the number of drug users in Africa is projected to rise by 40% by the year 2030. With us here are top 10 African countries that smoke the most cannabis. Welcome. At number 10 comes in Ghana, with a population of over 32 million people. 2 million people use cannabis. And amongst the 2 million people, youths are said to occupy 3/4 of the 2 million people who use cannabis in the country. At number 9 comes in Madagascar, a country which has over 29 million people as its population. 2.1 million people use marijuana in the year 2022. East African communities seem to be taking their place on the list. Uganda comes in at number 8. Uganda has a population of over 49 million people. And in the 49 million people, 2.6 million people are said to be using marijuana. And amongst the 2.6 million, youths are said to have a higher number in the population that uses marijuana. Sudan comes in at number 7. It has a population of over 46 million people. 2.7 million people are said to be using marijuana in the year 2022. Although it's illegal in Kenya, Kenya takes its place at number 6 with a population of over 46 million people. 3.3 million people are said to be using cannabis. With this high number of people using marijuana, 3/4 of the population is said to be occupied by youths in the country. Tanzania seems to be following sequence in the East African community amongst the countries that are using marijuana. Tanzania comes in at number 5 with a population of over 63 million people. 3.6 million people are said to be using marijuana. DRC Congo comes in at number 4 on the list of African countries with the highest use of cannabis. Currently, DRC Congo has a population of over 96 million people. In the 96 million people, 5 million people are said to be using cannabis in the year 2022. And amongst the 5 million people, youths are said to have occupied a bigger number in the share. At number 3 comes in Egypt. Egypt has 102 million people living along the banks of the Nile and in the Nile Delta, which fans out north of Cairo and along the Suez Canal. 5.9 people in the population are said to be using cannabis in the year 2022. Coming in at number 2 on the list is Ethiopia. It's the most populous landlocked country in the continent of Africa and the second most populous country of Africa after Nigeria. This estimate of how many people live in Ethiopia is based on the most recent United Nations projections and makes Ethiopia the 14th most populous country in the world. Ethiopia has a population of over 121 million people. In this population, 7.1 million people are said to be using cannabis, according to the report by the United Nations on drug use. On top of the list comes in Nigeria. Nigeria has a population of over 218 million people. Major contributors to Nigeria's population are early marriages, high birth rates, and lack of family planning access. The birth rate in Nigeria is about 37 births per 1,000 people. 20.8 million people are said to be using cannabis, and this is according to the report by the United Nations report on drugs use. On the contrary, here are African countries with the least number of marijuana users. At number 4 comes in Zimbabwe with 1.1 million people using marijuana. At number 3 comes in Malawi with over 1.1 million people using marijuana. Niger comes in at the second place with 1.2 million people using marijuana. Zambia closes the chapter with 1.4 million users who are using marijuana. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing so as to watch our next videos. Till next time, adios.